Hi, and welcome back to our midweek Bible study. Today is September 23rd in the year 2020, and we are going to continue looking at how to do really an in-depth Bible study. And I want to make that clear that we are talking about in-depth. This is not devotional reading kind of Bible study. This is if you seriously want to take a look at a book. One of the things that we'll be using is this book, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth by Gordon Fee and Douglas Stewart. This edition is about 30 years old. I know there is at least one more after this. There's also a companion piece to it that I was looking on my shelf and I don't see right off the moment, but this is, I think, well worth your effort. It is certainly written with the layperson in mind. It doesn't have any more technical jargon than is absolutely necessary. It's really for Sunday school teachers, for people leading Bible study, for somebody who just wants to do maybe a more in-depth study. There you go. So, last time we talked a little bit about just kind of an overview of how we do Bible study and a little bit about choosing which version of the Bible you might want. Okay? Today, we're going to begin one of a series on how to deal with the different types of books you will find in the New Testament. Today, we're going to start with epistles. Not only do they make up the majority of the New Testament, but they're often some of the books that people go to first. So, the epistles leave us with some questions and some interesting challenges, right? An epistle is just a letter, but letters in the first century of the Greco-Roman world are different than letters or emails you might send today. They have different expectations, and we kind of need to know that going in. We also, when we look at them, we realize, how are we supposed to take this in some cases? For example, 1 Corinthians 7:25 says, "Now concerning the betrothed, I have no command from the Lord, but I give my judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy." Okay, Paul flat out says, I'm not speaking with divine authority here. And then he proceeds to render his judgment. How do we take that? Do we take it as authoritative because it's Paul and he wrote it and we accepted the book into the Bible? Or do we give a different weight to that passage compared to another passage? How do we deal with things in a modern context? Again, 1 Corinthians is going to be an example for a lot of these. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, it talks about expelling the immoral brother. Well, how is that different in a modern world where he can just go next door to the next church? That'd be very different context than a than in Corinth, where being kicked out of a church meant being kicked out of all the churches. So how does that change things? And then, of course, we have times when the epistles seem to contradict. 1 Corinthians 11:2-16 says when a woman prays or prophesies, she should cover her head. And then 1 Corinthians 14:13 says a woman should not pray or prophesy, but keep silent in church. Those are contradictory. A lot of people want to explain them somehow to make them not contradictory, but they are. Okay. So, both in terms of the origin of these problems and how we address them, we need to have a better understanding of what an epistle is. So let's talk about their nature. First of all, we need to realize that they're not all the same. A Greco-Roman letter has 6 parts. Okay. First thing you will find is the writer given. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's more than one person. Second, recipient. Third, a greeting. Fourth, a prayer, a wish, a thanksgiving. 5, the main body of the letter. And 6, a final greeting and a farewell. In addition to that 6th one, we can have a little subcategory. Paul, when he talks about his travel plans, he typically does it in the form of the farewell. That is the standard Greco-Roman letter. Okay? We have hundreds of examples of this. Not simply from letters written in the New Testament or from church leaders, from everyday, I, Scott, salute you, mother. I hope these words find you well. It is my prayer every day that God will keep you healthy. I am writing concerning the girls. They are doing well in school. I hope to be able to write more later. May God again bless you. That would be an example of a Greco-Roman letter. And we have lots of them. The Greco-Roman world, the Roman system, made it possible for people to write letters to each other. Even in a system where most people weren't literate. In fact, only 1 in 10 men in a Roman city was probably literate. More so probably in Greece and in Judea. But there were professional scribes. People whose job it was, who would receive a letter and go, oh, this is for so-and-so. Runner, go get so-and-so. Hey, pay me a coin and I'll read this letter to you. So letter writing was a big deal in the Roman world. So we know what to expect. Now, what does this mean for our study of the Bible? Well, first of all, we can anticipate to some degree what's going on in a letter based on where it is. Second, if particularly Paul, if he varies from that standard format, it suggests something important to us. Okay, let me give you some examples of variations we find. In the book of Galatians, there is no prayer or thanksgiving. What does that mean? Did he forget? No. If you read Galatians, you see he's angry. He has deliberately left out the part of the letter where he wishes good things for his readers. It tells us something about how the writer is feeling towards his audience. We look at something like Hebrews, which in many ways has the form of a letter, but is definitely more of an essay. Probably intended to be a circular letter and very different than Paul's letters, which is why most people nowadays do not consider Hebrews to be one of Paul's letters. Third, 1 John doesn't have any of these, but it's a letter, definitely. But it's obviously something different. And then we have books like James and 2 Peter that seem to be addressed as letters, but have no clear recipients in mind, no clear connection between the audience and the writer. There's something different. And this textual analysis gives us a clue into deeper meanings in individual books. This is important because we understand that the epistles of the New Testament are what we would call occasional documents. They are a document written for an occasion, and that they are specifically first century documents. This creates some problems in our reading. The first is we don't always understand the occasion. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Certainly in the letters of John, there are warnings about some people and please do receive others. But we don't always know the occasion for a letter being written. Sometimes we're missing part of the conversation. I would say we're always missing part of the conversation because we don't know what preceded it or came after it in the ongoing relationship between the writer, mostly Paul, and the church. And other than a few exceptions, Romans in the case of Paul's writings, Hebrews in terms of the general epistles, maybe James, these books are not written to be theological documents. They're not written with the idea that someone is going to sit down and analyze them. In fact, they very specifically at times say, oh, but I'll tell you more about that when I get there. Or, you remember when I told you before. They make references to parts of the conversation we don't have. And their intent, since it's not to set out a specific theological doctrine, becomes harder for us to then glean one from it. So how are we going to address this? How are we going to overcome these historical literary problems that we might face when we begin to approach one of the epistles? Well, as we said before, the first thing we want to do is get historical context. Now, you may say, but I didn't go to seminary. I don't have a degree in religion. I can't do that. Yes, you can. There is a degree to which any literate person can carefully begin to at least ask the right questions of an epistle. So, the first thing we want to do is we want to try to develop a tentative, which means we're kind of holding it hesitantly. We're not running off with it, but we want a tentative but an informed reconstruction of the historical context. You may want at this point to get a Bible dictionary or a commentary or commentaries that you trust to look these things up. But keep them to the side for now. Have them ready, but do your analysis first. Okay? So the first thing you want to do is try to read the whole thing in one sitting. In the case of the epistles, most of those should not be a problem. I realize some, like Romans and 1 Corinthians, are a little longer, but you have to remember occasional documents. These were meant to be consumed in one sitting or one hearing. They're not meant to be broken up. And if you want a good feel for what's going on behind the letter, you really need to read the whole thing at once. Read the whole thing first. Now, as you might want to read the whole thing in one sitting and then go back and do this next step, or you might feel comfortable enough to do it at the same time. Don't let the note taking get in the way of your reading it the first time. Okay, so notes to be taken while reading it through. The recipients. Who are they? What is their situation? What is their relationship to the author? 2, what is the author's attitude towards the recipients? 3, hints of the occasion. Sometimes it is explicit. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes parts of the letter we can find a good understanding of what's going on. Other times we might not. When Paul says, concerning the things that you wrote to me previously, we know why he's writing this. Look for logical divisions within the letter. The first thing you do to find those is follow that 6-step pattern that we find in Greco-Roman letters. Keep you from rewinding right now. That is the writer, the recipient, a greeting, a prayer or thanksgiving, the main body, and final greetings or farewells. Okay? That helps you divide up the letter. Within the body, look for things like, now concerning or about such and such. Therefore, I was told all my life, if you see a therefore, you got to ask, what's it there for? These typically introduce new ideas being discussed. Okay? So what you're trying to do in this is get a feel for the book as a whole and for the historical questions you need to ask. You might then find that you need to repeat this in smaller detail with the subsections, the divisions that you have identified. This is the point where you may want to look things up in a Bible dictionary, in a commentary. The big difference between when the book I just showed you was written and now, so we have this thing called the internet. The sum total of human wisdom, if you just know how to ask. Problem is there's lots of answers out there. Which is why we always work to confirm our sources. We look at multiple sources. Okay? That's good. And remember, we're not trying to get detailed academic information here. We want a decent picture of what's going on in a situation. All right. In all of this, really, 1 Corinthians is a great one to apply this to. It is so rich and it has so much written about it. But there are things about the city of Corinth, about its founding, about who lives there, what kind of people they are, their relationship to Paul, things going on in the city, things that have happened since Paul left. All of that is fairly easy to find, and all of it plays a big part in understanding the letter. So that's something you look into. Do this so that you can answer that first most important question. What does it mean to the audience? To answer that question, we have to first do the historical context, as we have talked about, and next do the literary context. When you begin to approach the literary context, you don't really need any outside help. You need to know how to be able to read and to think critically, which honestly is a harder skill apparently than I thought it was. So you take the text, 1 Corinthians, let's say. When you read, think about it in terms of units or paragraphs, not chapters and verses. Chapters and verses were created to help people write it down, to keep up with where they were, and to find things. But they do not necessarily reflect the actual content or literary context. So think in terms of units, paragraphs, if you will. When you begin your literary analysis, state the content of a paragraph succinctly. Try to sum it up in a single sentence. Believe it or not, some of them were single sentences in Greek because they were hundreds of words long, not in English. Try to sum up single idea, single paragraph. Now, for each one of these sentences you make, state why you think the author says this. Again, in just a sentence or two. You don't want to take up a lot of space. We're trying to see how things fit together within a book. Now, remember that we want to do good exegesis. All of this is self-contained within the text. Nothing that is in a section of text should not fit. Okay? If something really stands out as not fitting, make a note of that. You're probably going to need to look that up. It might be that you simply have misunderstood because of some historical reason, but it might also be that there's something odd going on here. I go back to the example of 1 Corinthians chapter 14. There's a little insert that seems to break the flow of the sentence. A little hiccup. See about that. While these are being written and probably not rewritten a great deal, they're still written logically. There should be some flow to it. We are looking for, again, what did it mean to them? Identify those problem passages. Why are you having a problem with them? Historical assumptions. Try to figure out what is said for certain, and this is important, because most of us who will do this come with a pre-built-in method of interpretation. We have been told what passages mean, and we probably are wrong. Learning always starts by assuming you're probably wrong. But you approach a passage and you say, what is this definitely saying to the original audience? What can I say for 100% certain? Now, what is possible in this passage, but not certain? And make sure you understand the difference. If you can't do that, then there's no point in you studying, because all you're going to do is reinforce what you already think rather than actually learning. Finally, consult expert sources, good commentaries. So you want to know what a good commentary is, you might ask other people. If you can find a series that you like, that's good. Again, I suggest you compare sources. But let's say you find a commentary, you don't know what it is. Look up the author. Look up where they've worked. Look up the titles of other books. Try to get a biography, even a short one, off the internet from them. Because depending on their background, they're going to have biases. They're going to have assumptions. And they're going to say, this proves so and so. And it may be proving something that you don't believe in at all. Because, and this is, kind of in conclusion, what we're getting at. We have been approaching Scripture as we have it now for about 1,600 years. Okay? Canon was pretty much closed in 400. The Bible as it exists has not changed a whole lot in 1,600 years. But we got a lot of different interpretations of it by people doing serious study. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about serious study. We're not talking about devotional reading. We're talking about serious study. If you do not know something about the background of your sources, you're not going to get good answers. So, I hope you follow through on this. I recommend you trying it with 1 Corinthians. It's certainly going to be one of the more interesting ones to do historical and literary context on. It's going to be one that's going to have problem passages. But it's, I think, a good place to start. You want to do something that is simultaneously hard and easy, try Philemon. You need to look a lot at the historical and literary context in Philemon, or you're going to completely misread it. Probably wouldn't be Southern Baptists if people had read Philemon right the first time. So, what we're going to do over the course of the next few weeks is we're going to take one of the major literary genres that we find in the Bible, acknowledging that some of them fall into different categories. And we're going to talk about approaching it. Now, I have talked about this before, and I've had people go, you expect me to do all this all the time? I don't have time to do all that. Then don't do it. This is studying the Bible, not 101, but 201. Okay? This is for people who want to put in the extra effort. But if you call yourself a Christian, it's worth it. Until next week, may God bless you.